background, which involves layering. I hope you're going to enjoy it. So I'm going to be watching this live stream with you and answering any of your questions, any of your comments. You can tell me where you're from, and I'll see you at the end. Okay, so this is live and not edited, so you're going to get a real good view of what I'm doing and also the whole process. So everything that goes wrong, which I always include anyway, you're going to see. What I'm working with is this lovely photograph of a violet clematis. I'm going to leave that in shot. I have got the flowers drawn out. I've actually only taken 4 of the flowers in. The 5th flower I wasn't keen on, so I've left that out. One of them I've kept as a background flower, and I might put another flower in here as I go along when I'm painting. Then what I've done is I've come round with the masking fluid. So I've done 2 things with the masking fluid. I've protected the outside edge of the petals, and I've done the stamens in the centres. I've done the stamens in the centre of this one, but I've left that without masking fluid on the petals. That's because I want that to go into the background. So as we're going through, I'll talk to you about all of the colours. I want you to pop anything in the comments so that I can answer questions for you as we go along. So colours wise, I want all of these to be consistent. So I've got about a pea-sized blob, and I'm putting about half a teaspoon of water in. I have got Gamboge Yellow, Jadette Genuine, which is a Daniel Smith colour that I really like, Winsor Blue Red shade, Permanent Rose, and this one is Perylene Violet, which is there. So I'm popping in half a teaspoon of water in each of these, and then I'm going to be using my round number 10, and I'm just going to mix these up. I want a consistent mix. So that's my Gamboge Yellow. Should always start with your lightest colour so you don't taint it. This is my Winsor Blue Red shade, makes some fantastic greens. This is the Jadette Genuine. Nice dark green, some granulation in there. Tends to stain the brush quite well, so I'm just taking some of that out. This is the Perylene Violet. Lovely colour, works fantastically for darks. My paper's Saunders Waterford cotton paper, it's on a block. I'm painting this to fit a certain frame, so I've not used the whole sheet of the block. It's a rough texture, I prefer rough texture for everything, and it's £140 weight. This one is Permanent Rose, one of my favourite colours. This will come into a lot of paintings along the way. So because this is live, you will hear some hair drying at times. I can't help that. So I'm going to come into the background and over this background flower. So this is my large water brush. I'm coming all the way round. I'm just going to double check we're recording. Yes, we are. The light was funny there. That would be a disaster if I was sat here painting a painting, talking to myself. So I've come round the petals of the flowers that I've masked out. You've also got to remember there's a little bit in there. You can pop in the comments if you're painting along with me. That would be interesting to know. Or if you're just here to see what I do. Okay, so I'm going in with my round number 10. I am trying to get this rose out of my brush. Keep these colours nice and vibrant. So we're going to mix the greens on the paper. Going to come in with the Gamboge yellow. And this is all about creating a nice base to start with. With the cotton paper you've got lots of time. But you still want to work fairly quickly. So I don't need to totally avoid that flower. I want a fair amount of yellow in here. Where I've gone over that masking fluid, I'm just going to dab that out. Luckily it's only with the yellow. Then I'm going to come into the rose. So I'm going to pop, first of all, this distant background clematis flower in, and I'm going to put something in here as well so that I can work something else in. Everything works better in odds, so I'm going to make something up. And then I'm just going to randomly dab a little bit of rose in here and there. It gives a warmth. This stage always looks crazy and psychedelic, but honestly it works. Stick with me. You'll learn a lot. Then I'm going to come into the Winsor Blue red shade. Now, when we're applying this on, we're going to mix some of this with the yellow. This is going to give all different sorts of tones for leaves later. We're not going to eliminate all of the yellow either, so we want to make sure we keep some of it here. It makes lovely purples and coming in the rose. In fact, that's what's going to make the purple for the clematis later. Now, I've got a bit dry in here, so I'm going to get that on fairly quickly. And I want you to make sure you're coming right the way in to those background stamens. Make sure you're considering the corners. You want to get some dark within there. So it's already starting to look quite a nice mix. So you're going to get right in here. Right to the edge of that masking fluid, because that's what's going to make the edges. If you don't do that, then you won't have the edges that you've drawn out with the masking. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with the green. So I'm just going to dab some of this in here and there. It's a lovely bold green. So it's looking lovely and psychedelic. Which is just what we want. really good rinse. And then we're going to come in with the Perylene Violet. So the Perylene Violet is your dark, so I want you to consider where that's best placed. It's best placed where you're going to make those flowers pop out. So in those little bits, really close. So I say as a rule, you know, get really close to each of these flowers with this dark, because that's going to help make the pop. And then also consider your corners. Sometimes I'll leave light a bit and quiet space up at the top of a picture. Sometimes I go all in foliage. And I'm going all in foliage today. So I'm just taking off bits of dark in here and there. Take a little bit around the edge of that clematis. See, I've still got loads of time. This is really, really nice and wet now. I've added so much paint to it. It's the beauty of a cotton paper. So I'm just checking I've got all of those edges that have come in into that stamen area there. I've not missed any bits. Little bits there, there's a bit there. I'm very good at missing bits. Okay, so that's my background done. I'm just going to let it settle a minute. So we've gone here, look, I've blobbed with masking fluid. That happens frequently, so I'm just going to take that off. That shouldn't even be there. When it's dry, it tends to rub off anyway, so you don't need to worry about those little bits. We're not painting that area yet. Okay, so I'm going to dry this off. I'm doing it nice and steady. I don't want to move the colour too much. There's nothing like watching paint dry. You'll see the colour change. It'll start to fade and mute in. I've got the hairdryer on cool at the minute and as low as I can. You can see the paint moving, and I don't want it to move too far. I've done all this lovely work, I don't want to wreck it by blowing it all off the paper. Trying to dry it evenly can be a bit tricky when you've got wells of water. I've taken quite a lot on paint wise, so in an ideal world, if you were doing this and you're watching this video back, you could actually just let it dry naturally and the colours would then stay much more vibrant. I've got a couple of bits here that are running quite a lot, so I'm just going to dab off on the masking fluid there, and I'm just going to take the edge, run that edge there because there's quite a lot on there and it's just going to splatter everywhere. So I need to make sure that this is really dry because I'm going to go in with a second layer, and that's part of the process of making those flowers really pop out. So what I'm doing is feeling whether it's at a point that it's dry enough. It tends to feel warm to the touch and isn't too cockled. So you can see already that you just can make watercolours so vibrant. So I'm now looking for a pencil. I did have one. Here it is. So I'm going to do some negative painting now and put a second layer into the background. That's going to bring out a couple of flowers, these background flowers, and it's going to make these flowers stand even more forward because it's going to be really bold. So I find the easiest way to teach this is to actually come on with a pencil now and draw in your lines, because negative painting is we're painting in the background to bring out something in the foreground. It's quite a hard concept to get, but when you get it, it gives an extra dimension to your work. So in a way, I am now ignoring the original pencil lines and I'm working with the tones and the shades that are there, because that's the beauty of watercolour. It's an evolving process. So I've drawn out that flower there. I'm going to pop a little bit of a flower in here because I want something to show that I've got these, basically I've got odd flowers. I want odds in here. So I'm going to put this really far back. So I'm going to make it nice and small. And you'll see that all of these are at different angles. That's one of the reasons I've been attracted to this photograph, because they're all at different angles, each of these petals. I can use the other ones as reference. I'm going to overlap that one a little bit. And because this one's dark, I'm not even going to do the stamens on that. And then I'm also going to look at leaves. So already we've got some great tone in here, and rather than reference the photo too much, I'm going to pick out a few leaves. So I'm just drawing in a clematis shaped leaf. What tends to work quite well is to bring in a couple from the outside edge, because again this is something people do struggle with quite often when you're new, and then take a couple around the clematis. And now it doesn't have to be in an area that's got green. All of these colours are going to work as natural tone within the leaves, and it will just work. So I'm going to just look, this one here is crying out to be a leaf there. Let's move my coffee cup out of the way, and then this one here. So I've got they're sort of what's on the picture, on the photograph, so I've picked those out. I'm gonna do this one here. And I'm going to bring a stem in, so that's going to be a stem there. Now stems are a wonderful thing, and I'll explain why when we come to do the process. So I've put a couple of leaves on that one. I'm going to bring some more leaves in here. So these are overlapping a little bit. You want an overlap. There's an overlap on the flowers. I'm going to have a big leaf here. Put one in there. I'm going to pop another stem in. Another stem is going to go across here. And then I'm going to have a leaf there. And a leaf here. Maybe a little one there. I'm just picking out really areas that I think are going to be good leaves. Okay. So now we're going to work around the picture. We're going to choose an area to start, and then you're going to work clockwise or anti-clockwise. If you are right-handed, it's often easier to start and go clockwise. If you're left-handed, it's often easy to start that side and work anti-clockwise. So I am going to start up here. And I'm popping water on up to those edges that I've drawn. So this is me painting the background to bring out the foreground. So I'm going to bring out the flowers from the background. I'm going to bring out the leaves, and this is going to add a second layer. And I'm wetting all the way to my stem. Okay, so you can use a mixture of everything. What I tend to do is to take some of the blue into the yellow. So I've got like a mid-green, so I don't want everything to be that vibrant green. And I'm going to work fairly quickly into these sections. And come around that leaf. So you can see already I've brought out the edge of that petal. Oh, it's gone very dark here and it's throwing it down with rain outside. This is the blue that I'm popping in, so there's some variety of tone in here. And then I'll dip into a bit of the Perylene Violet as well. So this is going to make this nice and dark. See those edges coming out. Go back into this mid-green. So the mid-green is my base colour that I'm applying as I'm going along. Because I'm using transparent colours, all of those layers from underneath will still show through. Works fantastically as tone and variety. I'm going to come all the way to this stem, because the stem is a breaking point in the circle of second layer, if that makes sense. It's quite tricky to do the whole of this background in one go, especially when you're coming around things that are detailed. So what I've done is I've broken that process with the stem. That's a green, a little bit of the blue dabbed in. a little bit of the violet. Such lovely colours. And that sort of violet and then a bit of that Windsor blue just makes it so dark around there, and you want that to really pop out. So that was that natural break point that's going to create a stem. So I'm going to come the other side of that stem now. So this is nice and carefully with my wash brush again. You can only really do this with a good quality cotton paper. It's the layering, it needs to be totally dry for it not to lift. It does tend to lift a tiny bit, but you can get away with it. So I'm coming into this section. So if you need a break point, you want a leaf or a stem or a petal that stops over the edge. So I've got a leaf here that stops that there. So I'm going into that mid green again. And if you've got areas that are already dark enough and you think, oh, I don't want to put any more in there, I like that bit, then just layer the water over and work around it. You also need to consider, if you've got a break point, that it looks the same either side of that break point. I quite like this lighter bit, so I'm not going to take too much onto that. And by that I mean, if this was the violet colour, then that was green, it would look odd. It's got to flow through. So that break point has to flow. And then into the blue. And then dip into a little bit of the violet. I'm just going to darken this bit in here, so I'm just going to take the violet over there and I'm going to dab in a couple of bits of the blue. So we're working quite well around the paper now. It's a nice therapeutic process with flowers. Okay, this is a little area here, so I can just come in with the green mix. I don't need the water. That's a tiny little area. So I'm still on my round number 10. I've not swapped. Still going with this brush. And then that was the Windsor blue red shade. Okay, so I'm going to come in around these leaves now. And then I've got that next stem there, which is a natural breaking point. This way of negative painting just adds a real extra dimension to your work, and it gives a lot of light. So I've got two natural break points there. I've got the stem and that leaf just coming up to the stem. So you can see how you can be quite clever with these break points and it not feel such a big task, because it's a big task to get round this in super quick time when you've got it wet. And then a little bit of the violet. So I'm just doing those same three colours. Then I'm going to come in with the green mix again. I'm not wetting this area because it's a smaller area, and I can just whiz round this because I've got that stem as my breaking point. So you just make sure when you're doing an area like this that you've loaded your brush with paint, and then you can't really go wrong. It's when you don't put enough paint on your brush and it's drying. So we're going to dab in a few bits of the blue and then a few bits of the violet to try and get a nice edge on that stem. There we go. Okay, wash brush. Come into this section now, that final section. Which is probably the trickiest because I've got a whole flower to get around and the bottom of the other flower. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly mix up a little bit more of that green. You can see how much paint you use. That's a bit dark, so I'm going to take all of that yellow in. You want to try and keep the same tone. That's better. So this is just that main green again coming in, trying to work as quickly as I can because I know that this is a bit trickier, so I can't dawdle. Get a bit more of that blue tone in. To make sure you've got that nice variety of tone. Some will come through from underneath. And dipping into the violet as well. If you get any bits that start to dry, the best way to tackle it is to take more paint on. So I've sort of sacrificed this area whilst I've been doing the rest of it because I know that I can save this by just taking the dark in. Resting on my little finger. So this is the violet. And I'm bringing out this flower. And I want it to be nice and dark under those leaves anyway. Just dab into a little bit of the blue. Just dab that around. Okay, so that is the negative painting layer. So I'm going to dry that off now. Okay, so that's nicely dry, so you can see that build up of layers and that beautiful tone showing through as well. So the next stage is I'm going to put a bit of detail into these leaves. So I'm going to use the Jadette Genuine green here. So the first thing I want to do is where I've gone down to a number 6, where I've got leaves overlapping one another, I need to put some shadow in, or anything overlapping. I need a little bit of shadow. So I'm using that, there's one just here, just to then create that shadow. And so if I get a wet brush, just dab it off a little bit and then just soften in the leaf below. So I'm just pushing on the paint. Bring it down a little bit. If it spreads a bit far, don't worry. It's just touching in and giving that paint somewhere to go, just to soften in. You can end up with a harder shadow which works equally as well, and there's a little one here as well. But I can just do that over both of those edges. And it's just separating those leaves, because they need to be separate. And then here I have got a rigger. And my water's not very clean, but I will change it before we come on to do the flowers. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is run down the centre, following the curve of the leaf. Now I'm quite practiced at this, so I can do a lot in one go. And then with a wet brush, I'm going to touch one side of that just to connect it in. You can do lots of this, you can do lots of veins on there, or you can do little. When something's catching the light, you often can't see all of the detail. So this is my plan with these. These are catching the light, so I can't see the detail, so I'm not going to put too much of the detail in. And then you're just softening in one side. It actually doesn't even matter which side. As long as one of them's softened in, it gives it that sense of being on the surface of that leaf. So it's just following the curve of the leaf that you're doing. If you go the opposite way, it will look funny. So we always say less is more. If you want to do a few with a little bit more, you can. So if I bring in a few, just on these ones that are really close down here, just to give it a little bit more of a sense of foreground. And just because I can then show you how to do this. And again, you're just going to soften one of the edges. Just with a damp brush, and just soften those in. Miss that one there. Okay, so they're negative leaves. You've also got positive leaves. So that's when you actually paint the leaf. So if I come on with a little bit of this mid green, so we're just going to pop a few in. We're not going to go mad. There's already a lot going on in this background, but we can take a few more in here. Definitely. So this is that mid-green, and then I'm going to drop in with a little bit of the darker green. If you load your brush up, you can do more than one in one go, definitely. As I say, I'm quite practiced at this, so I can do a fair few. I tend to use two brushes as well. That works quite nicely. So I'm just going to drop in tonally a little bit of dark. So this is a darker green going in. You can use a little bit of the violet as well, or the blue. It's just giving it a little bit more tone. I'm just checking the shape of some of these, changing it a little bit. And I'm just looking at balance all the time. I'm thinking about balance. Quite like them being a bit more pointy, so I've come in with a number 6 a little bit just to spread the paint. I like the pointiness better than the round ones. And definitely need something further down, so it's just obtaining enough of a balance. I'm going to pop a little one in here, a bit of the dark on. It's strange because balance is personal to everybody. Everybody will say and see something different. Often the ones that for me give it balance are the ones that are coming in from the edge of the picture. There's a little bit of dark going on. It's just making sure you haven't created a pattern as well, which is very easy, surprisingly easy. I'm going to put one there, one here. Again, I'm concentrating on those outside edges first, just seeing where I want to go. One there. Don't want to look too dotty either, so what I'm doing now is just checking that they're not just all randomly dotted too much, and you have a few that are sort of clumped together because they tend to work better. Put another big one in coming in here, I think. The more effort you put into a background, the more your flowers will pop. Often my backgrounds take me a lot longer than the actual flowers because the flowers are very light at the end of this. I just want one coming in here. Okay, so I tend to, when I've got dark leaves like this, put very little on them in shape of veins, but I'll just dry this off and then we'll have a last little look. that's dry enough. There's a couple of tiny little bits that I want to do before we rub the masking fluid off and then start on the flowers. So the first thing I want to do is just look at the shadow on the flowers that are behind, basically. So I'm going to come in and just help to define a little bit of shadow. This is my round number 6 and the violet, and a little bit of detail, not a lot. That's a little bit gone into there. This one will be easier for you to see where I'm popping the shadow. So I want a little bit under there. I'm quite practiced with my number 6, but if you struggled with it, you could just go down to a line writer or a rigger. So I'm just really popping the veins in the petals. I'm going to leave these quite light. I like the vibrancy of the colour. I could have glazed over with a bit of blue to make them look more violet, but I'm not sure that I want to. Just going to bring in a little bit of that dark in there. It's all artistic license. You can change your mind. It's part of the process of evolving your watercolours. I'm just going to take a little bit of the blue into this to make it nice and shadowed. And then the other thing that I quite like to do, because when you see clematis, you often see lots of stems going here, there and everywhere, is to pop a few stems winding around. So this is the violet, and I think it sort of connects everything together and it adds a little bit of depth. And what I'm doing is creating windy stems. So it's going to make it all look like it's all overgrown and working together. You can come behind some leaves over others. That whole flow thing applies again. So if you flow from what you've got to flow, so you know where it's flowing, if you know what I mean. You can't just stop it at one side. It's got to flow through like that. And it just gives it a little bit more oomph. And a bit more depth. And a bit more interest. But it's doing quite well already. That sort of twisting over of 2 is really a really nice effect. If you can do a couple of those, additional depth and a bit of branching off. So I'll blob some green here. So to detract from it, I'm just going to run a bit of a stem through it. That was when I invented the stems, was to cover something up or detract from something. Okay, I'll give that a little bit of a dry and then I'll take the masking fluid off. Okay. Okay, I've just stood up a little minute because I'm going to go at the masking fluid, and it's always quite tricky to get the masking fluid off. What I've got here is a masking fluid remover. As I've got older, it's got harder and harder to get masking fluid off, but it's essential really in watercolour. So this just helps me remove it easier. What I'm trying to do is to preserve the stamens that I've added, because I want to keep those till the very end, and we'll rub those off at the very end. This isn't a delicate process. If there was other things I could use other than masking fluid, I would. I'll try not to chuck my cup of coffee over. What you'll find is as it comes off, the flowers really pop out. You should have some really nice sharp edges. This is like a workout. You see how I'm just being very careful around those stamens. You can actually just apply it after if you want to do it that way, if you're doing this and following the video later. You must always make sure that your paper's really dry before you start trying to take masking fluid off, or else it will rip. Masking fluid has a shelf life as well, so when it starts getting really sticky, that's when it's nearly time to change it over. As a rule, I say about 18 months, but because I teach with masking fluid, often the lids stay off longer when they're going around students, and I do need to replace it. So this is only about 6 months old, but it's getting to the point where I will have to change it. It's a bit too much of a workout. And there's nothing worse than doing all of this beautiful work and then not being able to get the masking fluid off at the end. Okay, so let's just rub all those bits off. And do some tiny little bits with my finger. Rub that bit off there as well, because I'm going to pop some stamens in there. This is when I should probably have a fancy brush that brushes off all of this, and I haven't. And I'm very quickly going to change my water, because this is really bad to do flowers with. You need clean water. By magic, there's some clean water appeared, and I can sit back down. Okay, so you can really see how that background has just worked wonderfully. I'm really pleased with it, if I do say so myself. So I'm going to pop some clean Gamboge yellow. I've got nice clean water, a must with flowers. When you come to do this bit, it's a must. And then I tend to use 2 brushes when I'm going at this. I shall show you the colour that I'm going to make now. So I'm going to take some of that rose and some of that clean blue, and I'm going to make a nice violet. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. I always use my wash brush because it's easy to squirt it out off the wash brush. Let's see what the colour looks like. Perfect. It's the perfect colour, and I've still got those two colours available if I need them, which I often do, add extra colour in. So we're going to come on to the flowers at last, but the background is worth it. If you've survived this far, you're doing very well. You're going to learn a lot. People pay me for this, you know. Demonstrations for art clubs, and you're getting it for free. So I'm coming on with a little bit of water. I'm going to do 2 petals at a time. And I'm going to mist the petals that might overlap because I want them to stay nice and crisp at the edges. So I'm going to use my round number 10 to pop the water on and a round number 6 to apply the colour. So I'm going to come right to the edges. And come right into them stamens. An odd little bit of white at the edge will work, and then I can just stroke that paint down. Come on to this one because this is the other one that I've wet. So there's not a huge amount of water going on because I'm not using my wash brush. Often when I'm teaching and I'm doing something like this in a workshop, if you take it on with your wash brush, it ends up too wet and you can't get those lovely lines. So it's a real balance. I'm just going to dip my brush into the rose because there's a hint of rose within the veins of these clematis, so that's just going to give it an additional bit of detail. And then if I want any shadow, I'm going to just take a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the background violet just to make a darker colour so that I can pop in a little bit of shadow in places. So it's quite nice to get it around those edges. So this is quite dark. If it's too dark, then I just want you to just, with a damp brush, just lift a bit out. The challenge is it will fade a little bit as we come to dry it, so I'm just trying to get a nice balance that helps this stand out. Okay, so I'm going to come on to this one. And this one, so I'll do 2 downward ones. And these ones are a lot darker, so we're just coming in with the colour. So I'm just using my round number 10 at this point just to get the colour on nice and quickly. With my number 6 I can stroke through, there's a little bit of light on that one. I'm just going to dab very lightly into that shadow colour, just pop a little bit there and a little bit there. See how quickly these are going now. So this one has got a bit of an edge of a petal, so we're going to wet some of the petal but not all of it. and that then brings out the edge. That we can paint after. Which is quite a little nice clever trick. Go into the dark. You'll just see me flitting and changing from brush to, depending on which one I think is the most suitable. I'm going to come onto this big petal, and there's one overlapping there. This one's quite good in the fact that none of the petals are touching, so we can go into these two without impacting those two that are still drying. I like to call it a petal production line. At this stage it's quite therapeutic doing flowers. I'm just making up a little bit more of the colour. Not quite. Just a tiny bit more of the rose, that's better. And I'll just blend that one in. So it's coming on really nicely. You won't believe we're nearly done. This is a lovely way to spend time. Painting such a lovely subject as well. I'm going to pop a little bit of the rose through. This just helps it maintain the same effect on that flower. And then a little bit of the shadow. A little bit towards the end. And then where they're overlapping, it's quite nice to run a bit of shadow just on that edge there. Just letting them settle a minute. I've got a little bit of that mid green that we used in the background, and I'm just going to dab that on in the centre there, just where the masking fluid has got gaps, so that's got a hint of green in there, so I'm just getting that in. I'm going to come on to this one. I'm like trying not to dry, but I think I'm going to have to hairdryer again, just so I can finish off. Just pop a bit of water on this side as well. I've got a super fine white line in between of those two, just so I don't have to dry it off. I'm just going to dab a little bit of rose in there, following the line of the petal. So it's got a little bit of variety. And then I want a bit of that shadow colour. Quite a lot of shadow in there. There's a bit here as well. So when you pop it on and it flows too much, you want to just dry your brush off and just manipulate it. This does happen, and it's just how you can. Okay, I'll give it a little bit of a dry. Come into these two. Bit of water. It's good practice to keep mixing up colours. The more you practice, the better you get at getting that same colour match. Can't see that now. Just shows I am referring to the photo. Make sure you're getting into those stamens. And just make sure you take your shadow in where it's going to overlap. And then this one here is going to be very light, so I'm just going to take I've loaded my brush up. I'm going to take a tiny bit of the purple colour in and just over like that. So that's how you create that lovely edge, that light edge. I've got one more to do, but I need to dry these two to do it. Okay, last one. Bring this lovely violet colour on. If you haven't got any of these colours and you want to give this a try at home, then just use what you've got. You'll still have those same effects, it's just that the colour will be very slightly different. I'm just taking a little bit of rose into that one. You can ask me in the comments, say I've got these colours, will they work? And I'll tell you what to expect if I know the colours. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'll leave that one to dry and work my way around, is I'm going to pop a little bit of work into the veins of each of the petals. Now it's just choosing an appropriate colour to do that. So I'm going to try first of all with that same sort of violet mix, but I'm just going to make it very slightly bluer. You don't want it to be too dark because you don't want to detract from what you've created, that lovely light. And I'm using my line writer and following the shape of the petal. Now one of the nifty tricks is often the line is broken up, and if you dab with a bit of kitchen towel, that gives that broken up effect. I mean, you can vary the pressure of your brush and get a nice broken up effect anyway. So this to me looks like the perfect colour to do this, so I'm very quickly, and some of them you will have 3 lines, some you'll have 2. I'm going to whip through these, and the important thing with this is that you just keep to the shape of the petal. Don't go straight, don't go the wrong way, you're following the same shape as the petal. As long as you do that, it will look fine. It's a bit of a practice. I tend to rest on my little finger. You just see how I'm curving around with each of these petals. I don't even have to look at the photo because I can see from the petal which way it's going. Now this one here is still drying, so I can't do that one yet. I'm just going to dab a few bits of this off so it's not too prominent. You'll find as it dries it becomes less prominent anyway. And then if I load my brush up and dab into some of this mix, the other thing you can do is start to put a little bit of sharp shadow on. Now sharp shadow means it's not softened in. You do need to look at the photo for this, but this will make the picture look like it's got loads of light. The trick to this is to use the same colour, but to just make sure that it's watered down so that it's not too bright. You don't have to get every single little bit, just go for a few bits. You can get bogged down with this sort of thing with those little highlights. Do a few little bits of stamens there, look. Will just be enough to make it look like it's sunlit. You can do some little dabs around the edges as well. I'm out of the purple again, so I'm just mixing some up. Just checking it's not too strong, that's fine. There's quite a lot of shadow within there. So sharp shadow, and then you've got soft shadow. So we've already done the soft shadow. These are the sharp shadows. This is the bit that makes it look like it's sunlit. It's quite a brave thing to do because you're at a point where your picture's looking really nice and then I'm saying to you, just put all these lines on because it'll work. You can see it's working. I'm not following it too precisely. I've not followed the petals too precisely, to be honest. It's my interpretation. Artistic license is a wonderful thing. Where this looks a bit darker, it's not really darker, it's just that I've come in with a lot more paint there and it will fade in. It's still not quite dry. I'm just going to put a couple more on here. If you go on and you think, oh, that looks a bit bold, then just dab it off. Just like we did with the centres, you can just dab a little bit and it still works. Right, I just need to give this a quick blast so I can do that petal because that's still wet. Wouldn't it be good to be able to do this without a hairdryer? So I'm just popping the shadow in on this one. And then Okay, so it's masking fluid removal time again. I'm just going to rub that off. You can see that green's worked really well in the centre. Now, before you go in with the yellow, just to finish those off, and just look at the bits where you might have bodged with your masking fluid. So I've got one here, so I'm just going to cover that up. That's just a bit of the shadow colour, and a little bit here. You can just alter it and adjust it. So if it's happened, masking fluid isn't the most forgiving thing. If it's happened on the flower, you just want some of the violet. So I'm just going to break this up, cover that bit up that I don't like, and that bit. Wet brush, and I'm just going to soften that in. So just soften that edge in, just so that it's not too obvious. I even managed to do a bit on the green here that I don't like. So if I take a little bit of green in here, it's just working out the colour of the background you're trying to infill. I'm going to take a bit of that shadow colour in and just masking what's gone wrong. You've got to be so precise with masking fluid, and I don't want to be that precise, so I tend to just fix it after. Okay, so nice clean brush now, and we're just going to take some of the gamboge yellow. We don't want it to be very strong, but you do want it to be very clean. And then I'm just going to come over just lightly pop the yellow in. Doesn't matter if you don't hit all the places, a little bit of white will still work. Then I'm just going to dry that off. And then I'm just going to take a slightly brighter mix through. So this is brighter and stronger, and that's then going to be my tone difference. And yellow and purple are complementary colours, so this should really now zing out. Help them pop out here. So I'm just flicking through a little bit of this yellow. I'm not going to touch the background one again, that one's absolutely fine. This is just to break up those centres. I'm going to pop a little bit of yellow in there for that very background one there. And if I dab, I've not rinsed my brush, if I dab into the background violet, I can just create that little bit of shadow and that colour within the centre of each of these as well. So just dabbing into the damp paint. And then the last thing I like to do really is to just stand back and see if there's anything else I want to add. Okay, I think I'm quite pleased with what I've achieved. What I might show you, just so you see the difference, is just to glaze this one, because it will set it underneath that one really nicely. So a glaze is a thin wash of colour. I'm going to use the same colour and I'm going to use my wash brush to apply it. And then what I'm going to do is just come over this one, and it will just make the whole of this flower look a little bit darker. It's just giving it a thin wash, and then that sets that back to the other flower. So I'm going to dry that off now. I'm going to answer all of your comments all the way through this. This is going to be a stream. It's my first live. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've not done anything like this before. And just pop your comments in. Thank you. So thanks for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more lives, let me know in the comments. If you've got ideas of subjects you'd like to see live, again, let me know in the comments. And please do let me know if you've had a go. It's a really lovely subject. See you next time.